Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. Thanks for joining us again for this month's CloudBytes, a Sage Intacct educational series hosted by Dean Dorton. Today, our Software Services Director, Philip Massey, is here to give us a refresher course on all things banking and cash management. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A icon to ask, and I'll be monitoring those throughout the session, and I'll make sure to share them with Philip during the Q&A period at the end. If you don't address your question today, or if you think of another one afterwards, there will be contact information included at the end of the session and in the follow-up email you'll get along with the recording. You'll receive the recording and the slides in that same follow-up email. We are going to have a poll question today. There are two ways to answer the poll, via text or via the web. There will be a slide with instructions on doing that, and I'll put it in the chat as well, so you'll have easy reference for it. And now I will turn things over to Philip.
Hi, Nikki. Thank you so much. I appreciate that lovely introduction. And welcome everyone to our session today. Glad you guys could join us. I hope you do find it insightful. As a caveat to the presentation, however, I want to say that I don't expect you all to be bank and cash management experts by the end of this presentation, but I definitely expect you to be curious by the end of this presentation. And hopefully you'll see some things in here that will make you think. As the song would go, make you go, right? And want to learn more about what I am telling you today. So we'll go through a bunch of things. I've got a lot of slides. We're going to hit all of these and hopefully jump into the software a little bit as well, too, because I know for a lot of folks, seeing is believing with it. So as it says, today's topic is all about banking and cash management. My name is Philip Massey. I am the Software Services Director for Dean Dorton. Probably have talked to most of the folks on the call, but if not, certainly would enjoy the opportunity to talk with you and learn more about how you're using Intacct, if that's something you'd like to do. So I'm going to jump through the slides. Today's agenda is basically going through bank reconciliations, bank feeds, matching rules, all those types of things, creation rules, all those types of things that are involved in the banking and cash management process. Hopefully, some of these are new concepts for you. Hopefully not all of them are new concepts for you, but we'll see as we go through. As Nikki said, we are going to have a poll today. The ways to participate in the poll are listed here. You'll also see this when we get to those. So if you would love it if you would, for just a moment here, either pull up that web address that you see or pull out your cell phone and punch in the 22333, enter the message Dean Dorton, just as you see on the right-hand side here. And then as we get to the questions, you will just simply respond appropriately. And there will only be one, and it will be at the very beginning. So this is something you'll have to keep up with a lot. Right? So whenever we talk about bank management, cash management, the ultimate goal of the banking module is to get to a reconciliation, right? If you're talking about feeding the data into it, if you're talking about working with the rules around the system, any of that, the ultimate end goal of a banking module is to have a reconciliation process so that you can be sure that the transactions that have cleared the bank are the correct transactions for your account. You can be sure that you have documented them in your system and really have confidence that your numbers that you're putting out are correct. The saying says, or saying goes, cash is king, and that's what we want to try to make sure that we do have under control. Now, there's a lot of different ways to approach, and I've heard over around 30 years of doing this, a lot of different ways to approach your bank reconciliation. So they're definitely not all equal. You've got different sized businesses, you've got different transactional volumes. I've had clients in the past that have done daily bank reconciliations, and I have had clients in the past that would come to the end of the year and go, oh yeah, I should probably do that before I, turn the numbers over to the accountant. So let me go back to, January and let's push this thing through forward, right? Not something you necessarily want to hear, but there's all kinds, all sizes. Often companies have multiple bank accounts and you kind of have to prioritize those. Maybe you have some sweep accounts, maybe you have some interest-bearing accounts, some savings accounts, or something of that nature. Checking accounts, you have maybe an operating checking, you have a payroll checking. They have different kinds of volumes within those accounts. They have different transactional levels in those accounts. And so you really want to step back, take a look at what accounts you have, and maybe you do want to reconcile your operating account daily or weekly, but your payroll account, maybe you only don't want to do that once a month. Maybe you have other accounts that you only want to do once a month as well. So there's all kinds of metrics, all kinds of concepts behind the bank reconciliation process that go into how to really have a good, strong bank reconciliation and bank management schedule. Now, of course, we have to get the transactions and those details into the bank account in order to be able to reconcile them. And the first way that we're going to talk about that, or the first thing that we'll talk about along those lines today, is the bank feeds. So when I talk about bank feeds, and I'm talking about Sage Intacct, I'm generally talking about the automated bank feeds, where Intacct gives you the ability, and hopefully this isn't news to anybody, but gives you the ability to go in and put in your bank. Hopefully it's in the list. If it is, select it, connect it to your account through authentication means, etc. And then on a routine and regular basis, Intacct will go out and download transactions for you. Or, of course, you can go download those transactions yourself. So that's specifically what I mean when I talk about bank feeds. And here's where the poll comes into play. So if you have your phone out, if you've got your other monitor and you're logged into the website that I had mentioned earlier, and if you're not, it's up at the top of the screen here. You can see it right up at the tip top here. So either this web address or text the word Dean Dorton to 22333. And my question is, or my statement here is, we are using bank feeds already in our organization. Your options are yes, and we love it, which would be A, yes, and it's okay. Maybe it's not the greatest thing I've ever seen. There are some problems. Stuff doesn't always match when it should, etc. And that would be B. C would be flat out no. We haven't gone there yet. And then D would be, what's the bank feed? I'm sorry, what are you talking about? So let's see what kind of answers we have here. So A, B, C, and D from the top down. And we'll give it a moment. So it looks like we're about 70% yes of some sort. So 2/3 yes of some sort, 1/3 no. But thankfully, everybody knows what a bank feed is. And maybe, hopefully, that's not just because I told you what a bank feed was a minute ago. So 2/3 using it of some sort, 1/3 not. Great. Okay. That's perfectly acceptable. All right. So we're going to close that down now. So thank you for that information. That's good to know as we go into this. All right, so let's talk about the different types of connections. And why, oh, there we go. I was wondering why that slide didn't have anything on the left-hand side. I didn't realize it was popping in like that. All right, so let's talk about the different types of connections. So on the left-hand side, we see what are really the more automated types of connections typically. On the right-hand side, we see the types of connections that at least will take a little bit more work. So when we talk about direct connections, these are the types of things with the Sage Intacct bank feed component. There could be a fee in some cases, depending on your bank and other factors. With Intacct, as long as you don't have more than 200 checking accounts that you need to connect, which if you do, I am sorry that you have that many checking accounts. I guess it's good on a certain degree because that obviously means you're doing well. You got a lot of money. There's a lot of accounts out there. But if you have more than 200, there could be a fee with Intacct. But generally, for most folks, it is going to be a no-cost tool that you can use inside of Intacct, and it would be any bank feeds that you might have to pay. The Help Center inside of Intacct has a list of all the banks that are included. You can also start the bank feed process, configuration process, and if you don't see, and I'll show you this in a few moments, if you don't see your bank listed for whatever reason, you can click a link to add it to a list of potentials in the future. Typically, it is a very reliable option, and even banks with key fobs or tokens will work. So you've got those direct connections. You do have an ability in some cases for indirect connections. Typically relies on a third-party integrator to bring the data together. You're not connecting directly to your bank, for example. You might be going through an intermediary software system to bring the data to you. Often with that, there can be a small fee of some kind, especially with some of the third-party aggregators, but that's not always the case. So sometimes there is no fee. This usually only works with banks that don't require tokenization. So in other words, you don't have to have a key fob. You don't have to have a text message sent to your phone every time you want to look at the information type of thing. There's no additional security, multi-factor authentication type requirements that are required. Okay? But those are the two that are typically a little bit more automated. And let's talk about the Sage custom integration here. This is often referred to as the SIG team, the Sage Intacct. It's a development group, and this would be a custom integration. I know here at Dean Dorton, we've had at least 2 companies go this route for different reasons. And that is essentially where a direct connection is not available, an indirect connection, maybe you have to have tokenization with your indirect connection and it's just not going to work for you. But you really need to get that integration done because you have so much volume, you have so many transactions. There is an option for a development team at Sage Intacct to work on creating an integration for you. As it says, quite honestly, this is the most expensive route. This is custom work to be done for your organization, right? So if you really need it, you've got that high volume, then it could definitely be worth it. Lastly, the file import, it's manual work. It's extracting the data from the bank and then using the CSV import process inside of Intacct to import those bank transactions into the system. Right? So lots of choices there. Now, when we talk about the automated bank feeds, if we want to get those set up in the system, so this is kind of for that 1/3 of the folks that are on the call here that haven't done this yet, you do need to subscribe to Sage Cloud Services, and that's under company admin subscriptions, and then turn that Sage Cloud Services on. You may get a warning here. I think you get a warning everywhere that turning something on may cause additional fees. This will not cause additional fees just by turning this on, right? So you can turn this on. The next thing that you would do is you would go to your accounts. So you go into the checking account, cash management, set up checking accounts. You would go to your banking cloud tab, and then you would click the connect button. You would find your bank. And this is where I would say here, if you're not sure if your bank's there, you can at least get this far, no cost. No harm, no foul, no blood, anything like that. We're all good. And if your bank's not listed, then you can always stop the process at that point. Now, if you do not see that your bank is listed, then of course there is this link that you can see here that says no results for bank not found. Tell us about it. And this will open up a form. You'll be able to put in the bank name, account type, and the bank URL. And that information is compiled at Sage. And as more people reach out for the same new bank, then that bank becomes something that eventually makes it into the software. There is a list that we can send out to you, or a link that we can send to you, of available direct connections now that you could take a look at and check if you wanted to first to see if your bank is among those that are out there. If it is successful, then the next screen that you get to will say, when do you want to start downloading transactions? You put your date in for when you want to start that process, you click continue, and it starts pulling down those transactions. So let's take a look at that real quick, right? I'm gonna stop the slideshow here, and then I'm going to. Oh, you guys saw my little Batman there. Never mind, you didn't see that. All right, so if I am in here and I have turned on Sage Cloud Services in this system. So at this point, what I should be able to do is come in here to where it says checking. And I see my checking accounts. I also see this top one has these two fields, right? Bank transactions being the pertinent one. If I come here to the second account and I click edit, and I come to banking cloud, like we said, and I click connect, and there's a tutorial right here as well. I skipped past that, but there is a tutorial on that page. We are now taken somewhere where if we bank with Bank of America, they are right here on the home screen. I can click this and it takes me through the Bank of America process. I am not with Bank of America. If I were with, let's say, First Citizens Bank, then I could come in here and I could find First Citizens Bank here, and it would take me through the process with that. Tells me what I need to put in to connect, my sign-in credentials, etc. I'm saying, okay, here we're going to do this and we're going to connect to it. I also can come in and I can put in the Sage Demo Bank for purposes of continuing through this process. This is, of course, a fictitious bank that I can use to connect to. You would have here your sign on for online banking if this were a real bank, but of course this is an imaginary one. So I'm going to hit continue, and that takes me into the process. Select which of these accounts, multi-factor authentication or not, that I want to use. So again, here key fobs, text messages, things like that are capable to be able to be used. We hit continue, and now we have download starting from. And if I wanted to say June 1, 2024, and hit continue, it will now go out. Bank account is connected, and you can see this screen has changed. It's pending confirmation right now, but it will eventually update with the correct information. All right. So that's how we get a bank feed set up in the system. So you can see bank feeds are fairly easy to get set up. From there, it does, take a little bit to really have the system humming to the way that it needs to be in order to make your bank reconciliation life easier. Now, once you have it set up, you can see the transactions that come into the system by going to cash management and then bank transactions. All bank fee transactions are listed here. If you want to come in and you want to see these at any point, again, when you have a bank feed set up, it will at a minimum pull every 4 hours. You can come into the account, you can click buttons, and you can make the bank feed go out instantaneously and grab new transactions if you want, but at a minimum, it will do it every 4 hours. You do have some transactions in some cases that you may want to ignore in this bank transaction window. For example, some $0 transactions that might come through, testing transactions, things like that. Duplicate transactions. If you've keyed one in and perhaps maybe it's not matching for whatever reason or something like that, you may just be better off ignoring the transaction. And then certainly if there are issues at some point, as much as we would love to say that the cloud is the be all end all and all those things, sometimes the cloud is actually a thunder cloud, perhaps, and it might rain on your parade, so to speak. So if you do have some issues sometimes with the bank feed not quite working, or maybe issues here, there, or whatever it might be, you can manually upload files. And in that case, there may be some duplicitous transactions that would come through with the actual feed when it starts working again. Right. Okay. So you've got ignore in there and unignore. There's also more actions. So as you're looking at a bank transaction in the system, if you drill into one and take a look at it, there is a more actions button here that you can take advantage of to do more with what you're looking at. So let's say it's an unmatched transaction, such as this one you see on the screen here. It's a credit transaction of some type. The amount to match is 10,000. You can come in here, and if this was interest earned, which $10,000 worth of interest, kudos to your organization. But you can create an interest earned transaction from here. You could create a journal entry from here, and other receipt from here if this was some sort of miscellaneous cash receipt that you had, or you could receive a payment in here, from a customer or something like that as well. So the more actions button gives you a lot of capabilities to be able to take what comes in through bank transactions and manually make something happen with it. Okay. I've got these transactions that have been downloaded. They're not in the bank yet because I haven't accounted for this bank fee, for example, my service charge or something of that nature. I could come in and create a journal entry for the service charge, anything like that. If I'm transferring money between accounts and I didn't notate it in the ledger for some reason, I was in a hurry or what have you, or someone else created it and forgot to let me know, type of thing, then I could come in here and create the transactions that are needed and if necessary, post them into the GL. Okay. So let's talk about a couple of concepts here. So you've got your bank feeds and the data is coming into the system. You're bringing them in. They're coming in, say, every 4 hours automatically. You go into the bank transaction screen once or twice a day. You look for new transactions. And you could go back, if we go back here, you could come in here, open up each one. You could go to more actions, decide what you want to do, go through the process and create the transactions. And you can absolutely do that. That's a perfectly fine way of handling things. However, you can also set up what are called creation rules, right? And these creation rules can be something that will do that work for you if you can programmatically state to the system what constitutes this type of transaction. So create roles and when you would want to use them. Auto create journal entries or credit card transactions based on bank feed or bank import data. They're good for transactions that don't need to post to a subledger and therefore are not 1099able. Transactions not otherwise recorded through a different process. You can use for common or definable entries, for example, journal entries to cash, bank fees, interest earned, other receipts, funds transfers, credit card transactions, credits and refunds, cashback transactions. I remember years ago we'd buy toner for our printer at work, and when the when you would buy it, of course, Staples or Office Max, Depot, whoever it might be, would encourage you to be in their toner club or whatever they wanted to call it, which sounds like a really cool club from high school, the toner club. But the you'd be in that, and then when you make a purchase, it'd be tied to your number. If you turned in old cartridges or old toner, whatever it might be, you could get some cash back for that. And often it wasn't hundreds of dollars unless you were using a lot of toner. Often it might be $10, $20, something like that. That's a good example of what this would be. That's not coming from a customer. That is really an other receipt type of transaction that would be coming into the system, where you really would just want to potentially even just offset it to office supplies, or you may have some type of other income account or something like that that it might go to, right? So miscellaneous type transactions is really a great way to categorize them. Again, they're not tied to a subledger. It's not something that is going to be a large type of transaction generally. It's just transactions that I would say are probably miscellaneous type transactions. So with these create rules, you can create these rules and use stipulations to be able to say, when I see this come through with my bank feed or my bank import, if you see this and it matches this criteria, then go ahead and create the type of transaction that I tell you to create. So to create a create rule, which that's using the word create a lot, but to do that, you'll need the detail section, the filter by section, the group by section, define transactions to create. You'll create that template itself and then add it to a rule set. Okay. So when we talk about the rules themselves, you have an ability to have sets of rules. You can have certain rules apply to certain accounts and certain rules not apply to certain accounts. So there's a way really to get super defined with how this works. What I would encourage you to do is to start small with this. From a create rules standpoint, probably one of the most common create rules is for service charges and interest earned type of things, right? Those are pretty common. Generally, the bank transaction or the bank feed is going to have the same description in it, for example, that you could feed off of. To be able to be sure that you are creating that rule and you're creating that transaction in the right manner. And we'll take a look at some of these in the system as well. So in the create rules, filter transactions, best way when you're setting these up, first of all, is definitely to have kind of a split screen, dual monitor type of thing. Have maybe your bank transactions screen open on one monitor and your create rules screen open on another. And for those of you that don't know, you absolutely can have multiple tabs with Sage Intacct in them open at the same time in your system. So you can set that split screen up and be specific with these things, right? Again, start with something that's kind of targeted, in my opinion. You're going to want to have, okay, let's knock out interest earned. Let's knock out service charges, because bank fees, service charges, because those are going to be those ones that we can pick off easily. As we see how those work, we can, of course, add additional ones. And anytime you're having to go into the bank transaction screen and go to that more actions button and create transactions from there, the more you do those repetitively, then obviously that becomes something you want to create a rule for, right? So be specific with it. It's a great way to start out with some things that are low hanging fruit is by being specific. Here's a little cheat sheet for you. And you guys are all going to get a copy of this PowerPoint so that you can review it. You'll probably get a link to the video in case you can't sleep at night. You'll be able to play this, and surely it'll put you to sleep by listening to things about banking and transaction rules. Right? Some of you might be a little nodding off right now. In fact, wouldn't blame you. So filter transactions by little cheat sheet, different types of accounts, whether they're bank accounts or credit cards, because this is sort of a one size fits all for that, right? Importing the process is very, very similar between both. Document types, whether it's debits, credits, debits or withdrawals, credits or deposits, decreases, increases, and then some examples here. So these are the kinds of things that you can look for to be able to set the create rules up in your system to make that bank reconciliation process easier. Again, our goal here with this is you've got the bank feed piece, and this bank feed is happening every 4 hours. So every 4 hours, you're going out and grabbing new transactions. And wouldn't it be wonderful if every 4 hours you had sufficient create rules and what we'll talk about next, match rules, to say, hey, we do a high volume of transactions in our account, but between what we already record through ACH payments we make, check payments we make, customer deposits we make, all that traditional stuff, plus through all the create and match rules that we have, when I go in to do my bank reconciliation every month, I am only a few transactions away. We've got a couple of miscellaneous ones that come up every month for different this or that, or what have you, things we might not have accounted for. That toner cartridge refund from Staples, rebate from Staples that came through, right? Except for those types of things, everything else is accounted for. Everything else is part of our reconciliation. And gosh, my bank reconciliation process takes me 10 minutes every month. Would that not be a glorious day? And that is the goal that you're looking for. So on your create rules, there is a group by function, right? You know, and in some cases with these create rules, the group by might not make a little bit more sense. In my mind, it tends to make more sense in the match rules than it does in the create rules, but it is here, right? And essentially what it's going to do is you have the ability to say, all right, any of these transactions that match this criteria in here, we're going to roll them together. Let's say you got 4 rebates from Staples, $20 a piece. With that, if you had a group by, you'd be able to take all those transactions and group them together based on either the posting date or the document number, right? Again, doesn't necessarily make quite as much sense here, but we will talk about it more in match. So in your create rules, you define transactions to create, transaction type, journal entry or credit card, transaction templates can be in the cash management setup area, and journals determine the approvals in the GL configuration, because don't forget, you can take advantage of a lot of other functions inside of Sage Intacct, including general ledger journal entry approvals, and including things like outlier detection as well. So all this talk these days about AI, artificial intelligence, and all the things that it can do for your organization, if you haven't turned on the GL outlier detection in your instance of Intacct, you are not hip and cool like me. And just gonna leave it there at that. And you don't want to be like me. You want to be hip and cool and turn on your GL outlier detection, right? Even with things like these create rules, it could still find things that might be anomalies within your books that you could catch before that month-end close to make that month-end close better, because we make our bank reconciliation better. We make our bank reconciliation faster through bank feeds and match transactions and create rules and things like that. What does that do? That makes our month end faster. We get to the point where we don't even need to do a month end anymore because we're doing it all the time. And we've got that continual close, which is still something that is out there that that we should be shooting for. Okay. Transaction templates, we can take a look at those as well too, and you can see how those transaction templates work. So a journal entry transaction template, you've got options for your posting state, whether it's draft or whether it's going to go ahead and post. Of course, again, you can bring in the approvals. The GL account is determined by the bank account that you select to use with this. And then the entity will be determined by the checking account setup, which is great to trigger your inter-entity transactions if need be. So here we just talked about intercompany transactions, right? Keep in mind, Intacct is a fully integrated system all across the board. So you've got the ability to have an automated bank feed that can create transactions that could be intercompany transactions based on how those transactions are posted and where they came from and what their definition of those transactions are. They could be intercompany transactions, which could then trigger an intercompany due to, due from journal entry as well. Lots of capabilities here, almost really mind-boggling with all the things that it can do. You can also set up transaction templates for credit cards. Again, bank transaction feeds, credit card transaction feeds, very similar between the two. You can see some stuff here, primary GL account determined by the credit card setup, which credit card you're working with and how that credit card was set up. So this applies to or takes that lead from the credit card setup. You don't stipulate that here. We'll post right away. No approvals available, and it'll be in the credit card recon piece and auto matched. Okay. So some create rule examples, journal entries, just flat out journal entries. Maybe it's something that went through the bank account. You just need to make a journal entry to account for it. Refunds and credits, bank fees, COBRA premiums, credit card transactions, and then this could be, you know, we took the team out to lunch. We went to I was talking about food truck rodeos earlier. We went to a food truck rodeo, bought everybody lunch, and I've got 6 charges from that or 8 charges from that. And they're all coming through on the credit card. And maybe I missed 1 or 2 or something of that nature. They will come through the system, or maybe you decide, hey, I got a credit card feed going on here every 4 hours. It's going to come in. I'm not going to bother with keying them into the system. I'm going to let the credit card feed do it for me in the system. Refunds and credits, credit card fees, right? Any type of credit card fees that you might have to pay, any monthly recurring fees, any interest charges, anything like that. And then, of course, online recurring payments. This is the cloud economy. We probably have more subscriptions in most organizations than we've ever had before. And some of those may be small ones. And this could be a way to let those transactions come into the system, and then we don't have to manually key those in, right? So these create rules, again, might not just be catching things you didn't put in. They could very well be putting things into the system for you. Now, so you've got create rules that are going to create transactions for you. You've got match rules that are going to match existing transactions in the system. So these are things that are already in Intacct. Typically, these are things that have hit a subledger, although they could be absolutely journal entries that you've already keyed into the system. The key here is these matching rules are already in the system. Vendor payments, vendor credits, payroll checks, ACH payments, charge payoff payments, customer payments that you might be receiving as well. So match rules. So 4 steps to create a rule, a match rule: details, filter by, grouping, and matching. And then you just simply add it to a rule set. Some best practices here, again, create your most specific ones first. If you want to come in and say, you know, customer types of transactions, or let's say deposits, right? If it's a deposit, and it's within 2 to 3 days of when the bank says it was and the books say they were, if they're that close, that's great. If the amount's the same, then let's make that a match with a transaction that's already in the system. Okay. A little bit of a cheat sheet for this one. Very similar to the cheat sheet previously for the create transactions, banks and credit cards shown on here. The deposit type of transaction, for example, usually going to be customer payments, any other receipts, anything again, you've already keyed into the system. If you've got somebody who is Johnny on the spot, grabs the information, dumps it into the system, then you might be more advantageous with match rules. If you've got someone who maybe wants to let the system work for them a little bit and book the interest, the charges, the service fees, all those types of things, especially, those would be more create rules that you would want to have as well. In here, the match rules, the group transactions by, these tend to potentially make a little bit more sense. You may have cases here where grouping by with the bank transactions or the Intacct transactions in here. If you've got many Intacct transactions and want to equate them to one lump sum at the bank, that would be something that you could do here. Vice versa, match many bank payments to a lump sum amount in Intacct. You could do that as well. So again, match transactions, money coming in, money going out. You're just matching the transactions that have already been put into the system. And let's say, if you had a lot of customer deposits that hit the bank individually in Intacct, but was actually one bank deposit showing up in your bank, that would be a good reason to use the grouping. Here's an example here of one of those. So payroll ACH payments that hit the bank in one lump sum, but you might have individual payments in Intacct, right? So you're grouping your Intacct transactions based on the posting date and then the criteria that's listed above for the filtering, where it's a debit, it's got ADB payroll in the description. And maybe the document number starts with 0002 or whatever criteria that you might have. That's an example of a match and a group match as well. They work and they will accommodate things. You can't really control the vendor or employee deposit date, right? So you do have an ability in here to say, within a certain range or things along those lines. Filter it by being a debit and then match by amount and document number, that type of thing. So there's a lot of options in here for how these matching rules can get set up, how the create rules can get set up, all of that. Okay. So here's just sort of an overview. Create your rules, add your rules to a rule set, add your checking accounts and credit cards to the rule set. And again, you can have multiple rule sets and different criteria for different accounts based on having those multiple rule sets. Activate and run the rule set by opening the bank rec, view the rule set performance log, and then refine the rules as needed. So that's good examples there of those match rules and what it really looks like for that process under the covers. So if we put all this together, what do we have? We have a reconciled bank account. So when we look at this one, you can tell that we are not quite reconciled. We're $10 off. And hopefully it's not one of those days where you just want to go, can I hand you $10 and let's just sweep this under the rug and make it go away because I've looked for 3 days or what have you, right? So your reconciled difference must be 0. If there's any unclear transactions, we want to take those into account. This is really what we would call, right, the anatomy of a bank rec. Your beginning balances, your statement ending balance, your book balance, and then you want to work your way over to where your reconciliation is 0. You've accounted for everything in the system. A game plan that you might have is to, for how to record bank and credit card transactions, is to take a look at each of those transactions. Is there a subledger impact? No, then you definitely want to do create rule. Yes. Is it already in Intacct? No, use bank transactions, more actions, right? You'll be able to go in, use that more actions button. You'll be able to manually create journal entries, manually receive a customer deposit, etc. If it's already in Intacct, then you just want to use those match rules. Begin your reconciliation, address outliers, and then reconcile the account. So this piece here, sort of in the middle, is where we're talking. Create rules, match rules, and more actions. These things can really save you a lot of time in your bank reconciliation process. When you get the slide deck, this is just a little bit of a cash management plan where we've kind of gone through and laid out a couple of different types of charges or entries to your account that might come through, how you might want to handle them if they're already posted, and then what the result of what you might want to do, right? Do we want to do a create rule, match rule, more actions? Typically, how would we handle these types of things? Okay. All right, so let's see. Let's keep going with the slides, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time here at the end to come back and take a look at both of those. So I did, and I unfortunately ran out of time with this. I did want to add another poll slide here to ask if anyone is using the new bank file import process. So just take a moment. If you are, silently raise your hand and I will silently acknowledge that you are, and I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to imagine that we had maybe about most of the folks not using this new bank file import process. So we're going to run through it here and talk about it. As you know, or hopefully know, from the very beginning, Sage Intacct has had a CSV import process built into it, and you have been able to import bank transactions into the system. But did you know that there is a new bank file import process that streamlines things a bit? To be able to use it, guess what? You do have to have Sage Cloud Services turned on. And again, that is something that you have had to have for really everything that we've talked about today. The bank feeds, there are ways around it, but the bank feeds won't work without it. And you won't get as much out of create and match rules if you don't have that turned on. And again, it's totally and completely free. What you may not have known is that there is a checkbox here now called Enable Bank Transaction File Imports. And if you check that box, that will turn on this new process. So really easy thing to turn on. You do need to then go grant yourself permissions to the new bank transaction import files screens. And really what this is a new methodology, a new formatting capability, a simpler formatting capability for importing transactions. If we go back to one of those very first slides that I had about the direct feeds, the indirect feeds, the manual import process, this is making that manual import process better and easier. Okay. There is a template that's available to help you in the process. Okay. It can be a little bit slower than the CSV import, but the trade-off on it is that it's a simpler process with less fields to get the data into the system. The minimum required information, in fact, is just date, description, and amount. An amount can be one column as a plus or minus, or two separate columns. They can be Excel files or XLS files. Only the first tab or worksheet is going to be imported. So if you've got multiple tabs there, you want to get everything that you want imported on that first one. And then here's your maximum file sizes. So there, it does not just Excel, but it can be CSV, QIF, OFX files as well. Okay. We'll come back to that demonstration. The workflow of the import, after you enable it within your environment, new menu item to manage your import files. So you'll see what it says right here, bank transaction import files, and it's right above bank transactions itself. This is where you manage those import files. You view the history of those import files. You see each and every time that these files have been brought into your system. So to prepare the data for import, as you can see here, it's a minimum 3 or 4 column layout. Date, description, money in, money out. Date, description, amount. Those are the columns. These are predefined column names, so your column names must match these. Highly recommend that you download the template and then put your data into the template. But if you can keep yours to be the same as these, you certainly don't have to do that. But you can see, going back to this for just a moment, you can see this is simpler than a typical Sage Intacct CSV import file. The first thing you do when you go into import bank transactions is you select the bank account, right? We didn't put one in the file, so we select one when we go into the screen. That's the first thing that we do when we go into that screen. Now, as a note here, a bank with a reconciliation in progress that used the legacy import will not be in this list of bank accounts. You have to finish that bank reconciliation using the legacy import methodology first before you can use the new one. After selecting an account, the last import is displayed for reference. You just click continue to continue with the import. Here's where you can, on this next screen, you can not only select the file that you're bringing in or the kind of file you're bringing in, but this will take you to the information to get your templates so that you can see more about what it is that you need to include in this file. Choose a file type right here in this area, and then upload the file into here. You will need to select a date format, and then you've got the options for entering in a comment further down on the page that's not pictured here. Date format here, you'll be able to pick from those, and then there's your comment box. So that's at the bottom of this screen is this. If you have errors, it will stop. It will be very obvious that you have an error, and it will allow you to start this process again. If you have an error in it, it is going to kick it back out to you. It's not going to do a partial file import. It will kick it back out to you, and you fix the error and you do the upload again. Once you get to a point where it's accepting the file and allowing you to bring it in, it is going to ask you to confirm some things. If it's a single column, a transaction is displayed to confirm if it's money in or money out. So all the system knows is you've got negative numbers and positive numbers, and it's asking you for confirmation of, is this money in or money out? The transaction import file can be viewed for accuracy. So you can review the transactions before they come in. Again, a departure from the existing CSV import file process. This will let you preview it to make sure that it's coming in correctly. And then again, you will be able to continue, the data is imported, and it will be listed as another file that was imported in the bank transaction import files process. They will then come over into the bank transactions list so that you can see them, and it will be part of what you have inside the system. Now, I know we only have a couple of minutes left, and I do want to give you the opportunity if you have any questions to ask, but I am going to jump over here real quick, and we're going to go to matching and creation rules. So cash management, setup, matching and creation rules. And if I come in here, I will see that I have two. I have a create rule and I have a match rule. This create rule is for bank fees. Again, what I consider to be one of the easiest ones to set up and one of the easiest things to kind of automate. Typically, what you'll have with these is you do have to put in a posting date in here. The system requires it. So, 1/1/2023, 2024, whenever you want to put this in place, right? 6/1/2024 would be fine, right? Bank transaction type equals debit, and then description contains bank fee. So when you get the data from your bank, if the words bank fee are in the description every time a bank fee is charged, then you would be able to include that. And that would be your real distinguishing characteristic. A bank fee debit is equivalent to bank fees. And so what's going to happen is when the transaction is created, or the transaction comes through, I should say, when the transaction comes through the bank feed and hits the books, this create rule is going to kick in, and it's going to create an actual transaction in the accounting system. So it won't just be in the bank transaction list. It will become a transaction in the accounting system for bank fees. It's actually going to become a journal entry, and it's going to use the bank fee transaction template to create that journal entry. With a match rule again is a little bit different. You're looking to go ahead and say, okay, as far as my reconciliation is concerned, this transaction, as far as my books are concerned, this transaction is already in here. I'm good with it. This isn't something I need to create. This isn't something I need to do anything further with. It's already in the system. So it is going to match the transaction and designate it as matched within your system. And it's really cool that my internet has suddenly slowed down, I suppose. Yep. That's really cool. So let me try that again. Nope. Let's try that again. Nope. All right. So I would show you that window, but in the interest of time, we're kind of running out of here. I'll skip that for now, but match rules, create rules in the same place. You do have your rule sets here, and you assign your checking and credit card accounts, your bank accounts to these, right? And you have your assignment rules in here as well. Okay. So one last thing just to touch on, we talked about the new bank transaction import. So if I come into here, I just enabled this in this demo company yesterday, so there's really no history here, but I would walk through the process. I would click add. I would pick my bank account. We're going to bring this into this account. We've not done any of these before. We click continue. We get the screen that talks about the file type. So here we select the file type, but remember, I can come right here and I can click this link and it will give me further help, which includes download an example CSV file with 4 columns, download an example CSV file with 3 columns, and then there's additional header options if you want to bring in more information, things of that nature. But if I were to, for example, download an example CSV file with 4 columns, and I open up that CSV file, and I bring it over here for you to take a look at, we have date, description, money in, money out. Right? So I've got my file. I would then come here, select file. It's going to open up here. I'm going to pick that. It checks the box. This is the sample that I just downloaded. I'll put 4 column CSV here. Month, day, year is the format. Any comments that I wanted to leave, and then upload the file. And it's going to import those transactions in. So you can come in here, you can do this process. And so here's our confirmation. It's minus 500 for a shoe purchase. 50. I think it might be somebody in this particular session that might be interested in shoe purchases, but I won't name any names. But what type of transaction is this? This would be money out and verify. So here's reviewing the transactions, import those transactions, and have them come through into the bank. This could take a few minutes. That's what that box said. And now I have an import in this particular company, right? So we have reached the end of our time. It is 3 o'clock. Nikki, did we have any questions?
I do not have any questions in the Q&A. So last call, if you do have any.
Last call. All right. If you need anything from us, please reach out. You've got my email address here. Our ERP support email address is here as well. Reach out to us. If it's a technical question, you're better to send it to the support address. If it's really anything else, you're welcome to send it to me, and I'd be happy to either respond or forward it on to someone who knows more than I do. All right. I appreciate you guys coming today. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and have a great rest of your afternoon.